Hello there, you're watching a single malt review. Dave and Tim here as we venture forth into the highlands once more for another Tomatin. We've been on a real Tomatin kick the last couple of months.
Yeah, we have. It's sort of well-worn territory for us now, so we're probably getting to know the distillery more or less off by heart. This is obviously just a wee bottle. I think this is one of the ones I sent back from Scotland last year. It's not one that we can commonly find down here in the southern hemisphere, so we'll take what we can from it.
It is Tomatin's 14-year-old portwood finish.
Yes, conspicuous in that it's one of the very few finishes that the core range, at least, of Tomatin does. It's certainly not one that I've tried before, so this will be new to, I think, both of us.
I've got to say, though, I'm liking the odds so far. I'm a big fan of Highland whiskey. I'm a big fan of port finishes.
I'm a big fan of Tomatin. I can admit that fairly freely. I think Tomatin is a real no-nonsense whiskey, and that's a real commodity when it comes to the world of Scotch whiskey, where nonsense is never far away. You could almost make that the headline.
Our scores to date on the previous 3 Tomatins were tried reflect that.
Yeah, they range from the sort of the low 80s up into the low 90s. So that's the band that it occupies. Good place to be. Good real estate. And we'll see what this one speaks to us of. Assuming I didn't check, but assuming it's
no colouring, no chill filtration.
Good. And 46%.
Yeah.
So that's all the boxes ticked there that we like to see.
And that is a very rich, quite dark colour for a 14-year-old whiskey.
Well,
there's a lot of quite fresh casks in there,
it's showing its colour, literally, as a port finish. There's that slightly rosé quality to the otherwise sort of quite a dark amber of the whiskey. What the base whiskey was that got finished, we're not absolutely sure, but assuming it was this sort of Tomatin house blend, then it will be quite a balanced blend of about sort of 20% sherry, 80% bourbon. Which is Tomatin's sort of bread and butter. So assuming that was the blend that got finished, then that's what we're dealing with here. There's always a chance that they went with a 100% bourbon for finishing, because those can be a bit less temperamental, a bit less punchy than things with sherry in them, but we just don't know.
It would suggest quite a heavy or prolonged finish, because a fully bourbon matured whiskey going this colour after a little time in port. Yeah, it's quite a dark colour.
It's a good one to see, and not too overtly pink. The ones that just come out sort of an insipid red, those ones, I think it was the Glen Murray. Their port finish had that just sort of too pink look to it, where you could tell the whiskey that went into it was very, very, very pale because it was very, very, very young.
Well, I don't remember. It may have been artificially coloured. I'm not
sure. Anyway, this one looks like a healthy red to me.
Yeah.
So anyway, without further ado, we will see what's on the nose.
It's very mild and subtle.
Yeah, not too overt. I think as we're beginning to warm up and now, as we're hotboxing this whiskey today in the studio, there's a little bit of sharp vapours coming off this one that's giving me just a wee bit of prickle, but nothing too serious. Otherwise, the port doesn't really scream at you. It's not too obvious, but then again, port doesn't tend to be if it's properly integrated.
Yeah, there's some mild flowers, some, like, I don't know, pansies, jasmine, that sort of thing emerging. There's sweetness, obviously, for a Highland whiskey. And a little bit of juicy fruitiness, which I associate with port.
I think the difference here, where it begins to diverge from the standard Tomatin. Oh, someone's trying to break in. That's all right, they've gone away. Where it diverges from the standard Tomatin is there is some significantly darker fruits in here. There's some stewed plums, and there's some stewed sort of stone fruit, even a bit of stewed apple and pear in there. It's a very sort of cooked fruit type thing that's going on.
And dates, sultanas, that sort of a thing.
Oh, dates are a good one. Dates are a really good one.
Yeah. Anything to do with port, it's like juicy, dark fruit, possibly being soaked in something a bit special. Let's try it. Oh, that is lovely.
That's pretty lush, really.
Yeah.
Even at the full 46%, it really waters the mouth. It's very, very juicy.
It's got quite a warmth to it. 46 is it's tasting quite hot for all that, but there is some of the sherry or bourbon matured lighter fruitiness, a little bit of that Highland sweetness, but on top of that, it's just the port finish I've added to this has delivered in abundance. It is full of rich, lush, dark, fiery and spicy port characters. Full of plums, full of prunes, dates.
Prunes are another good one there that I wasn't twigging on. I'll
Brandy,
just
sultanas.
put a careful bit of water in there because I think there's too much would be detrimental to this one because it's quite fresh just on its own. But I think a wee bit.
Port finishes can be quite special. And my still favourite whiskey of all time is a port finish, and this has achieved that same careful balance very well.
I think I'm always a bit suspicious of finishes, and the more active the finish, and port is very, very active, the more suspicious I get. But I think Tomatin has here done it quite subtly. They have used just enough port wood, and they've used it for long enough for proper integration to take place, which is what, for me, finishes live or die by.
Yeah, it harmonises very well with the underlying whiskey which went into that cask.
Finishes take on two different sort of faces for me. There's finishes which just act as a sort of a facade over the top of the whiskey. Finishes which are like you've almost sort of painted as this varnish over the top. And there are finishes which genuinely integrate with and change the nature and become the underlying whiskey. Those ones I'm quite at home to. I just wish I tasted more of them. But thankfully this comes in the latter category. This is a finish which it's integrated into the real infrastructure of the whiskey. It's really become its own thing. It's not just something sitting over the top of a standard bourbon matured whiskey or something.
I think it helps that it's had a full 14 years to mature in those original casks before having the port finish. If you slapped the port on earlier on a very young whiskey, you'd end up with something that's been overwhelmed by the port, or else it's a clashing mismatch of colours, characters, flavours.
So the nature of this whiskey, since we're sort of, I wouldn't call ourselves Tomatin experts by this point, but we have tried a lot of Tomatin in the last few months. Where this diverges from the style, Tomatin is quite a sweet, honeyed, fresh, quite a cakey, sponge cakey whiskey, trifly whiskey. This one is a much deeper, darker thing. It's much more European oak influenced from that port, or possibly the aging underneath it. Who knows? But it's gone in much more of a deeper red fruits, spices direction. It's taken a real, you'd almost call it a Glendronach-esque turn, is what they've done with this one.
It is a rich and juicy whiskey.
I think even more so than the cask strength, which had diverged slightly from the Tomatin style. This one has diverged massively, but it's done it in quite an elegant fashion. This is very, very different to your standard Tomatin, but for something that's a finish, I think that's a good thing. You don't want to have a port finish and find out that it's almost exactly the same as the Tomatin you could have bought for $20 cheaper or something. This really is distinctly different, but it's good on its own. As for whether you can still get this, that remains a question. I'm not sure whether this one survived the rebrand into the new bottles or not. You'd have to look that up. I won't try and do it now. I should have done that as part of my research. But at any rate, whether or not this one made its way across to the new squat, horrible, gnome-looking bottles, I don't know. So this may in fact be somewhat more limited or not. This one, our wee bottle here, is obviously the older run, the older style of nice, sensible bottles. But anyway, without going on too much about the bottles, I think this is really, really good. It's not my favourite Tomatin because though I appreciate the direction it's going, that's not my direction. I suspect it might be Dave's because I know where Dave's palate lives in terms of highland whiskies, so I think you might expect big things from him. But from me, it'll receive a fairly restrained 87. I think it's an excellent whiskey. If it was more in my ballpark, it would be getting a lot more because I think some aspects of this as a port finished whiskey are quite flawless in an arena with a lot of bad ones. But anyway, on to our port finished expert. What do you think?
Well, this is far and away my favourite Tomatin to date, and I'm sure a lot of it probably rests on the fact that it has a port finish and a very well handled, well executed port finish. And for that, I give it a 92.
Wow,
it is stunning stuff. I'm really greatly enjoying this. It is fun, it is rich, it is rewarding. It's a real whiskey experience.
So that is far and away the highest score we've ever given, or individually, a Tomatin. And when you do the average, that might be the highest scoring Tomatin on the books yet. So really, really strong stuff from the Tomatin 14 Portwood finish. If you can find some, that's a solid recommendation for us. But at any rate, that has been, we will assume, the last Tomatin for a little while, because we must be running out by now at the bottom of the barrel before they release a new one. Although we were just talking about the peated ones that they do. The interesting story behind those. So maybe truly the ride will never end when it
coming
comes to
soon
Tomatin,
to the single malt review, maybe.
Anyway, this has been us. That has been you on your end. I hope you found that fairly interesting. We certainly did. That was quite an eye opener for me. We'll have to look for a bigger bottle of that one maybe, and catch us next time for something completely different. We will hope. And in the meantime, Slanger, keep safe. We'll see you soon.